Veronica, for the introduction. Really appreciate the kind words. It's a great honor and privilege to be here today. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'll just get set up here. So as Veronica said, I've had almost 30 years in the FMCG business, working in 4 continents, 7 countries, for 4 multinational companies. Half of that time I have spent in China, for a total of, this is going into my 16th year. I first arrived in 1990, and I've done assignments in developing and developed markets coming in and out of China. I've worked for Procter & Gamble, Colgate, Carlsberg, and now Mondelez. The great news about all that for myself is I've been able to take the front seat in the most electrifying and dynamic urbanization and industrialization of any nation in the history of mankind. And I hope that today I can do 2 things. First, share with you how companies grew in China, so that you do not try to look back to the past and necessarily replicate that, because in the new norm, which is the second objective, is try to help you understand what you can do, what we are doing today to move into this new generation. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Do we have the clicker? Thank you. Can I use this? Okay. So let's talk about what the formula for success was in the 1990s as multinational companies entered China. It was actually relatively simple. You established a beachhead in either Guangzhou, Shanghai, or Beijing, step 1. Step 2, expand to the other additional cities. Step 3, go to the best universities in the country and recruit the best talent. Jiaotong, Beida, Tsinghua, Scout down in the south. The next step was to find distributors that would help drive your brand to deep distribution. Step 4, 5 was basically roll and aggressively go after distribution gains in small store. Step 6, in your spare time learn Mandarin. Step 7, get promoted. And step 8 was repeat the whole thing again. Life in the 90s was very, very simple. But the wonderful thing about working and living in China was what we call dog years. 1 year in China was like 7 years anywhere else in the world. And if you think about the industrialization of China, it took 200 years for the West. It took 20 for China. 1 year in China was like 10 years anywhere else in the world. And hence the dog year and a connotation. The good news about that growth was it was growing rapidly. Because it was growing rapidly, head office kind of kept you far away and said, just keep doing what you're doing. You had a lot of autonomy, you had a lot of decision-making rights, and people very junior in the organization and very close to the customer and the consumer were able to make decisions. That is what really helped accelerate growth in the first 20 years. There are 10 reasons why multinational companies were successful in the 1990s. I'm not going to talk through all of them, but essentially, in the 1990s, you had the benefit as a multinational company of iconic brands. You had global scale, you had financing, you had innovation, you had access to low-cost consumer and low-cost labor force. Everything was in your favor. Fast forward to the 2000s. The Chinese companies have basically neutralized this. The only advantage we have today, as you can see if I click one more time, is ability to leverage global scale. The new norm is not just about the economy. The new norm is about the Chinese companies have figured out our game plan and have figured out how to win. So we're now in a 2-horse competition race. It's not that they're copying us anymore. The Chinese companies are moving ahead of multinational companies, And multinationals must learn from Chinese companies as much as they must learn from us. The new norm is about cohabitation. As the economy started to slow, those of us that have worked in China for a while will also realize one other thing that happens. As the business slows, and China is materially important to most companies' P&Ls globally now, they decide to send in help, strategic help on how to build your business. That strategic help tends to last about 6 months before the next group of experts comes in to give you the next strategic help, which is usually contramines that. One of the other areas of development of companies in the next phase, in this new economic norm, is not just about what we do in the markets, but how we communicate to our headquarters and leverage that global scale and leverage the advice that we get versus being the victim of it. Now, Mondelez's example in China is a little bit interesting. As you can see, since 2007, we've had some pretty good growth. In fact, since 2007, our business has grown 4 times. But it was driven predominantly through acquisition of the Danone biscuits, the Lu brand, and through Cadbury in 2010. As you can see, our new economic norm began to happen around 2013. The company started to slow down. We struggled in 2014, but we used that period to really learn and understand what we needed to do to get better. And in the last year, 2015, we actually grew at high single digits, which in our industry, when most companies, most of our peer companies are declining, that is actually a tremendous result. One which I hope to share with you, how we got into the mess and how we got out of the mess today, which are lessons for the new norm. What generally happens in China, and everybody talks about the brilliant marketing and all the brilliant innovation in China, quite honestly, the success of China comes down to 2 things. It comes down to the fact that 500 million peasants moved from farms into cities. It was urbanization that drove growth. And the second thing was distribution. And as you can see from this chart, in most personal care companies, and thanks to Nielsen who provided this, Nielsen tracks 70 categories in China. This is a composite view of personal care companies. What you'll see on that red line is what tends to happen is their market share grows and then it starts to drop off. The major reason for that drop off, is distribution starts to flatten. The growth is about getting more and more stores selling the product. Once you hit a plateau, your market share starts to flatten and even decline. The new economic norm in China today is, again, not so much about the economy, not so much about the communication at the head office, but it's about how you build velocity in the outlets that you are today, because you're probably not going to be able to get to as many more as you expect to drive the growth you had in the past. So the 4 common elements of what drove a company's business in China. The first was distribution pipeline. The second was products with consumer benefit. The third was having the right price point at different retail environments. And the fourth was simple product portfolio. What Nielsen's done here is shown a composite view of a bunch of FMCG type products, tracking back from 2004 to 2015. The blue line is the distribution. The red line is the market share. As the distribution builds, the market share builds. As the distribution starts to drop off, the market share drops off. As companies hit a plateau with their distribution, they need to find new ways to drive velocity per outlet. Now, once the distribution pipeline happens, and the market share slows down, and the category growth slows down, companies begin to fall into a massive trap. And this trap is what's happening to a number of companies in China today. The first one is, when the business slows down, what does marketing do? Marketing says, let's launch line extensions. What does sales do? Sales says, let's go to our big customers and do price promotions. Then what happens is your pricing in the market becomes unstable. Your stock weight of your hero SKU shrinks. And you get very fragmented distribution, which means when a consumer goes to a store to purchase the product, they may actually end up buying a different product because they're not as sophisticated at understanding our packaging icons. What this leads to is confused shoppers, confused retailers, and even your own sales force becomes confused about the product value and the consistency, which potentially damages your brand's strategic equity. So what we'll see in the distribution is what you'll begin to see as early warning signs that your business needs a restate. First of all, you'll find that your distribution becomes very fragmented. Second, your product equity starts to decline. You'll see unstable pricing first in the wholesale market and then around the mini markets and convenience stores. And then you'll have SKU complexity, which drives up your manufacturing costs. This is what tends to happen at that curve when the market share and the business growth starts to flatten. This is the biggest risk that companies operating in China today are going to have as we move to the new economic norm. They're going to misdiagnose their slowdown in their business as the economic slowdown, so they have to change things. What they need to do is go back and look at what they're doing to their business to try and maintain growth. Personal experience. What happens is it takes about 3 years to get out of this mess. The first phase is denial. So what do you do in the denial phase? You blame external factors, such as the new economic norm or the economy slowing down. You blame competitors. You blame head office. You blame AC Nielsen. You say AC Nielsen doesn't know how to read the market. And if you're fortunate to have a consultant, you blame the consultant. Once you get through the denial phase, you start to get into the fear and helplessness phase. And this phase is where your headquarters gives up on you and says, you clearly have no plan, so we're going to send experts in to help you. And then you start to self-doubt, you don't know what to do, and the organization goes into basically lockdown as they just wait for everybody else to tell them what to do. That lasts about 1.5 business cycles. Now you're starting to get into the second annual business cycle where everyone's fed up with the results and you start to get recognition and accountability that the mess was created by multiple levels. You tend to see in this phase a change in the management team because obviously it was all their fault. You get a change in the management team and you also get head office coming in to actually constructively learn and understand and help. And then you start getting into the next phase, which is recognition of what the real problem was and start to grow. What the next generation of growth in China is going to be, we can talk a little bit about. I did want to give 2 examples of where this happens. Because of the time, I'll give you just one example of this whole fragmentation of distribution. And it's when I worked for Colgate in the toothpaste category in 2002. We had achieved 80% weighted distribution. In fact, we had the distribution that every company, including Wrigley, Coca-Cola, talked about trying to match the Colgate distribution. So, as our distribution plateaued, our growth plateaued, so what did we do? We launched line extensions. Now here was the real danger with the toothpaste category. The Chinese consumer in the cities is quite sophisticated. Once you go down to the lower tiers, and I'm even talking tier 3 cities, not even tier 4 or rural, they do not necessarily understand the difference between the different variants in toothpaste. They just saw Colgate, and they just assumed it was the same one. The consumer downscale has very limited cash. The consumer in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, they have a bit of money to burn. So what happened to us in toothpaste? To drive growth, we started launching new line variants. We tried to say that we wanted to get a second SKU at 80% distribution. So we ran trade deals on the new SKU. That SKU did get distribution, but what happened was the retailer just swapped it out for the hero SKU. So it was 100% cannibalistic. Then what happened? The consumer that went into the store who liked our Colgate toothpaste, just the regular toothpaste, they wanted to buy that one. But what happened, because the distribution was now fragmented, when they went into the store, the only one they could find was our herbal toothpaste. But because it had big Colgate written on the front, the consumer didn't really pick up the difference in the Tier 3, Tier 4 and rural cities. So the consumer took that tube of toothpaste home and started to brush with it. And I don't know if you've tried Chinese herbal toothpaste, or if you've tried Colgate normal toothpaste, they taste very different. Very different. Like Western medicine and Chinese medicine. Very different taste. The consumer downscale tried the herbal toothpaste and didn't like it. The difference for the consumer downscale is they have two choices. Throw that toothpaste away and buy another tube of toothpaste, but then they cannot afford to buy rice for the day. Or every morning and every evening brush with this toothpaste that they absolutely hated. And what we saw was our brand equity in the Tier 1 cities was fine. Tier 3, Tier 4 was starting to drop off. And the reason was the consumer downscale distribution was getting an inconsistent experience with our product. Once you lose that consumer, it's very expensive to try and get them back. So the whole line extension, sales promotion is very cancerous to this new economic norm. And it's one that companies should avoid. I wanted to move to, I'm not going to repeat, I wanted to thank our BCG friends. We had a conference with them, I think it was about a month ago, right, Veronica? And we were talking about the data. Veronica shared it, but the growth of the future, the incremental growth, this is the critical thing. The middle class is still important for buying, but the incremental growth is going to come from the upper middle class consumer. 60% of that is a generational switch. Products that were working for the 60s and 70s people now have to be adapted to the 80s to the 90s. 50% of the growth is going to come from lifestyle and services. 50% of the growth is going to come from lower tier cities. And digital is going to become an incredibly important part. Those numbers have been shared with you before by Veronica. What I would like to share with you now is what we're doing about getting that down. So let me move to the first one. In the 1990s and 2010, the middle class was generically anyone with disposable income. And essentially that was peasants moving from farms to cities and getting income on a regular basis. For this decade and into the early next decade, it's going to be the consumers of the middle class and especially the upper middle class that are going to drive. In broad distribution, it used to be go out and find distributors and do small store coverage with sales reps. Today with e-commerce, with Alibaba, the Tmall Village, and with Jingdong, they're aggressively going after this small store distribution. Scale up revenue growth. It used to be hypermarkets. Hypermarkets are moving out. It's now the e-tailers. The e-tailers are the ways to scale up your business in China. Product portfolio. It used to be about global brands, but as you move down scale, it's not necessarily about Chinese brands. It's about appealing to those Chinese consumers with relevant flavors, tastes that are relevant to them. And finally, the organization used to be heavily dominated in the leadership world by senior leadership, was from the foreigners. We need to move increasingly more to Chinese experts. So let me flip through these. So, how we're succeeding in the new economic model and what we've done as a company starting from late 2013, early 2014 is we basically began to, what we're doing in the upper middle class, the top number one, we are moving from products that appeal to the masses to products that appeal to the niche. We're loading our portfolio now with a lot more premium products with premium pricing, which comes at a more appealing sense to the upper middle class. The second thing we're doing in that area is we're bringing in a lot more import products. If you look at Oriole, one of the campaigns we're working on at the moment is if you go online, you can buy Oriole from China, it's 20 RMB a pack. You can get Oriole from America, it's 30 RMB a pack. You can get Oriole for Japan, it's 40 RMB a pack. You, the consumer, can choose which one you want. So there's campaigns like that that you don't only have to premiumize with a different line extension, you can use your import products to give that premium image. Alibaba Tmall Village, the number two, the route to market. We've got to be very careful that as you go down the path of expanding your distribution, that you don't go back to the old model necessarily. There are going to be cities that it still is worth having a sales rep walk up and down the stores. But what we're doing now is we're working with Alibaba and Jingdong to identify the cities that they will become our distributor in that city. And we will not need to pay for sales reps. We will not need to pay for merchandisers. The route to market needs to change to take account for both online and offline. In terms of omni-channel, I think Veronica gave the example of a number of companies that started online and are now moving offline. And there's companies like ours that are offline that are going online. It's not whether you're on or offline, you've got to be on both. And you can't just be on both for selling. It's about reaching, advertising, promoting, and getting the right combination of consumer engagement to build the consumer loyalty. And if I move down to product and portfolio, the lesson we learned when hypermarkets started to come in, we got very good business in the hypermarkets, and so you got the fastest selling SKU in the hypermarket, and then started to sell it to small stores. It didn't work. We had to reformulate the packaging. For example, in hair care, in the hypermarkets we would sell the big bottles of shampoo. In the small stores we'd sell the sachets. As you move from offline to online, don't fall into the trap of saying this is my fastest selling SKU offline and move that immediately to online. The online shopper is a very different shopper and a very different occasion. There is the weekly purchase, but the way they purchase is far different than the way we used to purchase in stores. Another way to think about it, and the example I give is, I was on a ski holiday with my wife in Zhangjiakou. I was on a ski lift, and I said to Ming, I need some Coke Zero. I've run out at home. So we're in Zhangjiakou, and I set it on a ski lift. She got onto her mobile phone and ordered a case from Jingdong, which was delivered to our house when we got back from the ski trip. The shopping is not a weekly shopping trip anymore. With the advent of smartphones, people shop all the time. It's not that they go into a store and buy a whole bunch of products. They could be buying diapers today, 2 hours later they could be buying Coca-Cola, 4 hours later they could be buying toothpaste. It's how you find the right product and the right way to connect with them and to get that repeat purchase. So in closing, I would like to say the 5 considerations in terms of winning in China. First, meet the needs of the upper middle class consumer in all city tiers, not just tier 1, tier 2. Route to market, ability to adjust your route to market profitably to accommodate both online and offline consumers. Omni-channel, be present and create the ability to succeed online, and that means the recruiting profile of people you've had in the past to win in sales may need to change as you move to online sales, as with your marketers. Fourth, the product portfolio. this is a really delicate balancing act. You need to find a way to offer consumers something different without messing up the profitability and productivity of your standardized mass production lines. An option that I offer up today is look at import products. An import product enables you to provide differentiation in China by using another country's production line efficiently that you can then bring into China and make an offering that can be higher priced, can be premium, and doesn't mess up your productivity of your production lines in China. And then finally, talent development. The biggest challenge we have in talent development today is not so much diversity. Diversity is still important, we still must work it. The talent development, big opportunity today is we've got to decide if we're an MNC company, a multinational company operating in China, or are we a Chinese company operating within a multinational company. And the significant difference there versus the past, because China is materially important to the P&Ls, we have to figure out a way to develop the leadership talent outside of China to understand what China organization is saying. It's no longer edicts from above. We have to find a way. And the diversity of talent you bring in has to be talent that has the ability to listen and understand and to help drive solutions, not just tell us do it this way. Those are the 5 areas that we've worked on. They have worked from us. As you can see, 2015 was a good year. 2016 continues to be a good year. I wish you all the success in this new norm. And as I always say to the organization, our customers, 一起工作，一起快乐，一起发财。谢谢大家。